Hi there, welcome. Today I wanted to share with you a pattern that I recently designed and I cannot wait to get it on the long arm. I'm going to show you part of it because I can't get the whole thing in the viewfinder, but I will also put a picture of it in here so that you can see the whole thing. But here's the quilt. It ended up being a nice twin size. It was made with Kate Spain's Paradiso and a Bella Solid. Let me see, hang on just a second. It was made with Kate Spain's Paradiso and with a Bella Solid. And then just two fabrics. Let's see if I can show them to you. This is one of them, and the border is the other one. This quilt actually has 4 borders to it, but none of the borders are huge. This was 4.5, so it'll finish at 4 inches. This was 1, and then 2. So not huge borders, but it ended up being an absolutely adorable quilt. In fact, when my daughter saw pictures of it on Instagram, she quickly texted me and said, "Is that one for me?" And she is not normally a pink and blue girl, but she really liked it. So hopefully this one will be going to her. So if you'd like to see how I put it together and get the instructions, please stay tuned. It'll follow right after this. And I am currently working on getting the pattern up on my website. It's not quite there yet, but by the time this goes up, hopefully it will be there. So stay tuned and thank you for watching. The very first thing I'm going to do is take my layer cake, and wow, it really is beautiful. The one I'm using today is Paradiso. Yep, Paradiso by Kate Spain for Moda. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to cut it into 4 equal strips that are 2.5 by 10. So I'm going to first go through and cut it in half, and then I'll go back through and cut it again. And I am going to take, probably 4 at a time. I'll move that out of the way and show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take 4 at a time, and I'm going to take my larger ruler. This is my Creative Grids 12.5-inch ruler. I'm going to take that, and you can see I've got a 10-inch square. So I'm going to take it, and I'm going to first make a 7.5-inch cut. Then I'll make a 5-inch cut. Then I'll make a 2.5-inch cut. Now, one of the other things you could do if you're concerned about potentially making an incorrect cut is you could start by cutting the entire stack in half, and then in half again. And that's actually how I'm going to do it today. So I've got my layer cake lined up, and I'm lining it up at 2 positions. I'm not just doing one. I'm lining it up on the edge here, and I'm lining it across the bottom here. So I'm going to move this up a little bit so I've got a solid line. Now, a lot of times people worry about where on the pinking edge they cut. I just take and I take one spot on the layer cake, and I use that as my guide for the whole time. So on this, what I'm doing is I'm really just cutting off the top of the pinking. So I'm going to take it, I'm going to line it up again, and I'm going to make a cut. And when I make my cuts, once I've made my cut, I'm going to just put this in 2 separate piles. I'll flip them upside down. And then I'm going to go on to my next stack of 4. I'm going to do this for the entire layer cake. And then once I've done that, I will be back to show you the next step. All right, so now I've got 2 stacks. They're 5 inches by 10 inches. So I need to cut them again. So I'm going to take 1 stack and set that one aside. And now I'm going to work at this stack. I'm going to do the exact same thing that I just did. I'm going to take my grouping, carefully lay them down, keeping them all nice together and neat. And now I'm just going to cut them so that they are 2.5 inches by 10. And again, just lining them up. I'm going to do that for my entire stack. separating them into two different piles again, and then we will be back. I've got my next two sets, so all of my layer cake, my initial layer cake is all cut, and I'm ready to put the first step of the blocks together. Remember, on the first one, I took and flipped one over so that one is right side up and the other one is right side down. On this one, I've got both of them right side up right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the first 4 of them, and I am going to take those and stack those right on the back. So now I'm just going to put right sides together and sew these together. The reason for doing that is because I want to keep the blocks really random. I'm trying on this one not to match any of this exact same blocks together. So I'm going to take these over to the sewing machine. I'm going to put right sides together. And I'm going to do about a 2.0 stitch length. I'll move these so that you can see better. And I'm just going to stitch right down the line, sewing the right sides together. I'm going to do that for all of the strips. Once I've sewn all of the strips together, I will be back to show you how I'm going to go about pressing these. So what I did was just laid out 5 of them. I'm going to set my seams. And I'm just going to grab the top one. I'm going to lay it across my pressing stick, which I've shown you before. And I'm just going to open the seams with my fingers. I'm going to do 1 finger press down. And then I am pressing all of these seams open. Once I press it open, I double check to make sure I'm good and go on to do the rest of it. This is my Moda Bella Solid, and this is the next thing that I need to cut. So I'm going to grab, 3 or 4 of them. So I think that's good. And I'm going to grab just one of my strips because I want to show you. What I'm doing is putting a 2.5 strip up here. Now I'm going to grab a ruler and show you the size of this strip. So this strip is approximately, looks like I'm just a squeak over 4.5. I guess I really got really skimpy with my 4.5 inch seam, looks like I really got skimpy with my 1/4 inch seam. So I need my pieces to be 2.5 inches wide by 4.5 inches long. I'm gonna put that back to my pile. Then I'm gonna grab my 12.5 inch ruler again. And I'm going to make my very first cut. Now remember, it needs to be 4.5. Make sure I'm in the screen so that you can see me. My piece needs to be at least, at a minimum, 4.5 by 2.5. So I'm going to start by cutting this. Whoops. And look, I'm at the 5.5 and I need it to be 5 because I need to cut it in half first. Good thing I stopped. So I'm going to make my first cut. Then I'm going to slide my ruler over and I'm going to get my 2.5 inch. I'm just going to pick this up and slide this just a little bit so I can see my 2.5. And now I'm going to cut this one at 2.5. The next thing I know I need to do, and I'm going to keep these lined up right together, I need these pieces to be 4.5 inches wide by 2.5 inches. So I'm going to take this and I'm lining it up right on my 4.5 inch line, and I'm just going to come right across and I'm going to cut. Remove my ruler. I'm going to pull these away this way. And now I need another strip that's 4.5 by 2.5. I'm going to have these little extra pieces down here, but that's just fine. It's not that much waste. These are great for leaders and enders if you need extra plugs when you're sewing, if you don't have actual blocks going in. Set those aside. So now you can see I have my blocks. Now I'm going to do that till I have a total of, I believe it's 78 of these. And right now I've got 3, 6, 9, 12. So I've got 24 and I need 78. So I have sewn all of my strips together and I have put my 4.5 by 2.5 inch strip on the end of all of them. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of these and I'm going to put them into 6 piles of 13 because we are now ready to put our rows together so that we can put the entire quilt together. When I go to do this, I really am going to try to be random because I want this to come out really scrappy. So we'll just start, I'll just make 6 piles. 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm just gonna just pick them up and lay them down and get it to the point that I've got 13 in each and every pile. All right, I'm gonna try to show you up close how I do a continuous sew. So right next to my sewing machine, I have my stack of strips that are put into piles of 2 right sides together. So then I come over to the sewing machine and I just line up what it is that I'm going to be sewing. On this block, I want to make sure that my seam is going to still lay flat. You can notice on this one I didn't pin it. There really aren't any points that I need to make sure stay together, so I'm just going to do a straight sew. So I'm going to get it underneath there. Now I'm going to pick it up and line it up. And when I line it up, I pick up, hopefully you can see it. I know I'm a little bit off camera. What I do is I pick up the bottom of it and then just gently lay it down on top of the fabric that's laying on my table. And then I can feel and see right where the edge is. And I just sew. And when I get about halfway, I double check and make sure I'm still doing good. I stop when I get close to the end and pick up my next one. And I do the same thing. Now I'm going to do this on all of these strips, and what I'll do is show you how I start matching them up. I never leave the sewing machine until I have this entire row done, and I'll show you how I manage to do that. Sewn together. So I've got another row. I've got 4 more to go, and then I'm ready to press it. Now when I go to press this one, I am once again going to press it open. And I'll try to insert a clip of that too so that you can see me pressing all of the seams open. So here's my row, and I'm just going to stick it on the other side. Just let it hang down. And I'm going to grab my 18-inch strip stick, and these are available on my website if you are interested in one. You can go out there and see them. And what I'm going to do is first finger press this open, and then and do that on all of the seams that are not pressed right now. So I just go down and finger press it and go on to the next. And I drape it over the edge like this only because, I drape it over the edge like this only because what happens is then the weight is kind of helping me to lay it flat so I don't have to rearrange it every single time I move it. I'm just going to press this entire thing open, or all the unpressed seams open. I really like my strip stick. I use it quite often. I got a couple different sizes of them. They actually come in 4 sizes, and I'll list the sizes below so that you can see them. This 18-inch one tends to live right here at my pressing station. I do use this one quite a bit, only because I sew with pre-cuts quite a bit. So I tend to, when I'm doing little 5-inch blocks, I tend to use the next size down. And then there's a couple sizes bigger than this 18-inch one. So, like I said, I'll list all the sizes below so that you can see exactly what it is that they offer. See how nice this works? Just goes one right after the other. Okay, so now that I've gotten my strip sewn, or pressed, I'm sorry, I'm going to take my sizing. I really like this magic sizing. I use it quite a bit, or I use it all the time. I do also like Mary Ellen's Best Press, and I do use that too. So I'm going to just shake it up, and what I'm going to do is just a light spray all over it. You can spray it on the right side or you can spray it on the wrong side. That's up to you. I'm going to let that just sit for a minute just to absorb a little bit. And then I'm going to press it or iron it. And while I'm pressing, I can really feel it that all of the seams on the wrong side are laying flat, and that's what I care about. And I think this is going to be really pretty. Nice bright quilt. So, there it is. I'm going to do my other... All right, we're ready for the next step. And the next step is actually putting together the borders. First, we need to figure out exactly how much fabric we need for our border. So what I've done is I've taken my measuring tape. This is my favorite measuring tape for doing this because it's extremely pliable and it goes up to 120 inches. So it is available on my website, so you can go check that out if you need one. But you should be able to find it at your local quilt store. So I have taken my measuring tape and I've laid my quilt out flat. And I've measured the top, the middle, and the bottom of it. And I came up with 3 different measurements. I came up with 58 inches, 57 7/8 inches and 53 3/4. So now I'm going to take my calculator and I need to add those three together. So I'm going to start with 58 plus 57.875, which is 57 7/8, plus 57.75, because that's 57 3/4. So I come up with 173.625, and I'm going to divide that by 3 equals 57.875. So what that's telling me is that my top and bottom border, the first border, needs to be 57.875 inches. So I've taken my strips, I've cut 1.5 inch strips. So what we need to do is cut our border fabric. So this is my border fabric. It's 1.5 inch wide strip. And for the top and the bottom border, it required 3 strips. So I cut my 3 strips. My third one, I cut in half and attached it to the ends of the other 2. So you can see here, it's attached. I've just pressed it to one side. Now I'm going to measure this out, and I will cut it at exactly 57 7/8. And then I'll go about attaching it to my quilt. When I attach it to the quilt, what I'm going to do is attach each end. I'll do an end to an end, then I'll find the center of both my quilt and my border, and I'll attach that to the quilt. So let's first do this. Let me get all these strips out of our way. My calculator tells me I need 57 7/8. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut away my selvage, because I do not want my selvage in my quilt, because that will definitely shrink different. I'm going to take this and I'm just going to get rid of my selvage. Make sure I got it. Yep. Lock my rotary cutter again. And now I'm going to take my wonderful measuring tape and I'm going to measure out 57 7/8. Being careful to just lay the fabric nice and smooth so that I don't pull it or stretch it, because that's the last thing I want to do is stretch it. Oh, I'm going to get to about there. Yep. So I'm at 57 7/8 is right, it's right here. So I'm going to right now stick a pin in it, because that's the first way that you can do that. My pin's not very straight. So there's your pin in it. So this would be my cutting line. So I would need to cut off that excess. Now it's time to grab your pins and your quilt. And I'm going to show you how I go about pinning this. So what I do to start is I take one of my ends and I'm going to take one end of my border fabric. I'm not going to pin right here on the end to start with. I'm going to go into my first seam and I'm going to pin there really well. Make sure that I've got it good and straight, and I probably will stick 2 pins in it. Then I'm going to go to the other end of the quilt, making sure that I keep my fabric flat and that I don't have any twists in my border. And I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to line up my edge. I'm going to go into my first seam and I'm going to do a good double pin. The next thing that I'm going to do is find the center. I'm going to fold my 2 ends together. And I'm bringing it up. I'm going to find my 2 ends. And just folding it in half. And here's my center. I'm going to stick a pin in that. And then I'm going to find the center of my quilt by doing the same thing. I'm going to just fold it in half. Find the center, which is right here. Stick a pin in it. And now I'm going to open it back up again and take my 2 pins and line those up because I know that's the center of both of them. So I'm going to take those 2 pins, just stick those in. And now I'm going to start working with smaller amounts of fabric. I'm going to take I'm going to fold this in half. And at this point, I can line up either my pins or my ends. I'm going to choose to line up my ends. I'm going to pull this out flat. So I'm working with the fabric to make it lay flat. And I'm also not pulling at it, so I'm not creating any pulls or stretching of the fabric. I've laid it flat. You can see I've got a hold of this end of it, and I'm going to take and stick a pin in there. And then I'm just going to continue to do that until I have all of it pinned. Once I've got it all pinned, I'll take it over to the sewing machine and sew the top and the bottom borders on. And then I'll be ready for my side borders, which I will treat the exact same way. I'll measure, once I've pressed this, I'll measure it. And I will, at that point, I'll put it, I'll measure it. And so what I'm going to do is attach these borders all the way through by doing that same thing, finding the centers of things, sticking a pin in it, and then laying it out and making sure that I can work all of my fabric in a straight line. So borders are really easy as long as you take the time to do the measurements first so that you make sure that you've got them right. There's nothing worse than putting all of that time and effort into a quilt and then you get down to the borders and they aren't measured correctly, so consequently what happens is you don't have nice borders. And that's how you get the waviness. So when you've gotten your quilt back from the long armor, if it's real wavy, that's why. More than likely you didn't measure your borders. So here we go. It seam didn't quite press flat, so I'm going to stick a pin on both sides of it so that I can take it back over to the ironing board and iron it out nice so that it lays better when I go to sew it. Because otherwise what would happen is I would have a, right here, I'd end up with a fold over and you'd have more layers of fabric right there and it wouldn't lay real nice. So here I go, just finishing this up. And I'm going to do the same thing to the bottom border. And once I've gotten all of the top and bottom border put on, I'll come on back and show you how I go about doing the side borders. All right, so when you cut the Bella Solid layer cake, you should have had a total of 9 full 10-inch squares and then 1 square that was only half. So what I've done here is I've taken my 10-inch square and I've cut it into 2.5-inch strips. And I'm also going to need my half one. So I'm going to take my half piece and grab my ruler. And I'm going to cut this in half. One, two, well, let's start with it at 5. I'm going to grab my ruler and I am going to first get it to a 5-inch because I'm going to need 2 2.5-inch squares. So this is getting me to a 5-inch wide. Now I'm going to cut it in half. There we go. And now I'm going to add this to my stack. So now what I have here is 2 stacks of 2 stacks of rectangles that are not 10 inches long by 2.5 inches wide. And there's a total of 16 of them here. And then I have 2 stacks of them, 2.5 inches wide by 10 inches long, and there is a total of 7 in each stack. So I'm going to take the 2 stacks that have 7 in each stack first, and I'm going to sew them together in one big long strip. So I'm going to have 2 long strips, and then I'll come back and I'll sew these 2 together in long strips. Once I've done that, I'm going to show you how I put them together to make the border. All right, my first 2 borders are on. You can see here's border 1 and border 2. And now I have gone ahead and measured again at the top of my quilt, at the middle of my quilt, and at the bottom of my quilt to come up with the length of what my next border needs to be. And I have prepared that one, and I'm going to attach this. So this is your next border to go on. This is the final border that I'm getting ready to cut. I'll be cutting these in 4.5 inch strips to start with, or 4.5 inch. This is the final border I'm getting ready to cut. I'm going to cut this in 4.5 inch strips, and I'm going to need a total of 8 of them, 2 for each side. The quilt at this point measures, I think it is 66 by 77, something like that. And as I said, we'll be adding 4.5 inch borders to it. I'm going to put these borders together exactly like I did the other ones, just sewing them end to end. I will be, again, measuring the quilt at the top, the middle, and the bottom, dividing that number by 3 to come up with my average for how long I need each one of the border strips to be. And here is the corner. Well, you can at least see the corner to see how the quilt looks. Here is the way the quilt looks at this point. It obviously needs another press, but this is the way it looks right now. And I will be back and show you once I've got the borders on. Now remember, when you attach your borders, your best thing to do is find the center of your quilt, the center base between the pin and the end. Do the same thing with the border fabric. Attach the 2 of them together, matching them up at the pins, and then that way you can more evenly distribute any fullness that you've got in the quilt. So I'll be back to show you the quilt when it's all done. Thank you so much for sticking around and watching how I made this quilt. I'm calling it Layer Cakes to a T because it takes 2 layer cakes, and the block actually reminds me of a T. So that's what I'm going to call this quilt. The pattern, as I said in the intro, will be available very shortly on my website if it's not already there. And I'd like to thank you for watching. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please give me a thumbs up or leave a comment below. I read everybody's comments and I really enjoy reading them. And thank you so much. If you haven't already subscribed, please do. And don't forget to give me a thumbs up. Thanks so much. Bye.